Hello. You are listening to the Carroll Connection with your host, Jared Carroll.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Carroll Connection. I'm your host, Jared Carroll, here to bring you guys another great episode. I did want to take a chance to shout out last week's episode 196 with Billy G. It was his second appearance, first time since I think it was episode 132, if I'm correct. And he came back on the podcast, talked about his journey to Michigan State to do a seminar, basically teaching a lot of the students in the area between college and even some high school students. And we talked a lot about spirituality on that podcast. We got into a lot of different things, and it was a really great podcast. If you want to check that out, go to the Carroll Connection. TheCarrollConnection.simplecast.com. Also available Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the major listening platforms. If you'd like to watch your podcast, go to YouTube or the Carroll Connection, and it should pop up or the Carroll Connection will pop up right for you. And if you want to be a guest or return as a guest, hit me up on Instagram at Jared M. Carroll or at the Carroll Connection, and we'll set that up. So that brings me to today's episode 197 with Allana.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Happy to have you on the podcast. We had a great pre-show. I was kind of give you some background on me, and now I'm kind of really interested to hear about you and your career and the stuff that you've been working on. I'm really excited to dive into that. So, but if you could introduce yourself, who you are, and what you're doing currently.
Yeah, so my name's Allana Turcotte. I have a degree in psychology, and right now I started a herbalism business. So it's called Virgo's Brew, and I'm kind of making it something different. I'm, incorporating like the meditation and all other aspects of it.
Perfect. I'm really excited to dive into this stuff because, as I was telling you, obviously with some of my career journey, whether it was spirituality or things of that nature, with meditation and things like that, I find it super valuable. And
Yeah.
the stuff that you do, I think, is going to be very fundamental to add to like the network of the Carroll Connection. And I'm really excited to dive into some of this stuff with you. So, as I mentioned off podcast, I like to start with family dynamic.
Yeah.
And for anyone that's new to the podcast, I'm going to give my same old like little cliche with it, and apologize to anyone that's listened to the podcast. I always compare it to like building a house, and our family, for better or worse, is the foundation to that. And I always find it important when we're talking about your life story to dive into family dynamic, because it gives you insight, especially me as a host, insight into like where you're kind of coming from with a lot of the stuff. And I think it just can be really relatable for a lot of people, because there might be something in your family dynamic that's different than my family dynamic, and that could really resonate with someone in the audience. So I try to do this and document it as best I can. With that being said, with whatever you're comfortable with sharing, I'll let you kind of dive into what your family dynamic was like.
Yeah, sure. So growing up, it was my mom and my dad, and my sister. I have an older sister. And honestly, I'm very grateful. I had a really good growing up. My dad's really into gardening. And, that's kind of where I got that from. He's a very hard worker. So he's taught me a lot in life. And yeah, my mom's awesome. She taught me to be a very independent woman. And I didn't have like anything crazy happen, but I'm very grateful for the opportunities that they gave me in life. They were always very supportive.
Yeah, what was the relationship like with kind of like your sister? Did you kind of look up to her maybe in like maybe a role model sense, or like what was that relationship like?
Yeah, for sure. Like my sister's older and we're closer now.
Mhm.
Obviously, like younger, people like fight or bicker. Like we weren't as close when we were kids, but growing up now, like we definitely have our differences and we view life differently, but it's it's interesting to have a different connection with her now than I did in the past. Because like as you grow, like your relationships change with people and for the better or for worse, but obviously it's for the better for this one. So
Yeah, I could actually really relate to that with my brothers, because growing up, we definitely fought a lot. It's kind of stereotypical boy things that actually did occur, where we'd fist fight. Never in the face, but we'd always fight. And I don't know, it's just like one of those unwritten rules that we just didn't do. It's just like that
Yeah.
crosses a line where it's like that's really intentional. You're trying to hurt someone. It's like, yeah, I'm trying to hurt him, but like not hurt him.
Right.
But for most of our childhood, it was kind of on and off fighting. But as we got older, we really got a lot closer, and the respect for each other grew as we both succeeded in our careers and our sports endeavors and all those things. And now it's like when I look at my brothers, I would do almost anything for them. Like it's
Right.
like almost this protective nature. Where it's like that's not just my brother, that's my friend too. So
Yeah.
it's like I would defend them with everything that I have if someone's trying to hurt them or speak like negative towards them. And that's come with time. Like as we've gotten older, the respect for each other has grown and the love for each other has grown. And it's cool to see that because it's not like that for every family. So it's
Right.
interesting to see that and also hear that you kind of had a similar relationship where it definitely got
Yeah.
better as you got older.
No, for sure. And like I feel like now I'm more appreciative of like who she is as a person. I feel like before like we were always very compared with each other because we are close in age. And so I feel like that was a little hard to like grow up kind of with that aspect of like why aren't you more like your sister or like why aren't you guys more similar? But I think now like I appreciate and value our differences. I look at it differently and like we both respect each other in that kind of way like you were saying like respect is earned. And like when you're younger it's kind of hard to like feel that sometimes.
Yeah, you don't always know too. Like
Yeah.
it's not something that you're always specifically taught growing up. So as we kind of age and develop friendships and you see how they interact with other people, not just you and your family, that also changes that perspective too. And it's cool to see them become their own person and be able to root for them instead of it being so much of a competition when it's like that
Yeah.
coming up. It's like, yeah, you're really competing with them a lot of the time, especially with sports and stuff like that. That's where a lot of the competition with me and my brother would start. Like, I mean, even ironically, the name, the Carroll Connection, kind of came from where we have like a cul-de-sac in like the neighborhood, and my oldest brother used to be quarterback. It would be me and my brother playing receiver and defense on like football. And then as we got older, we still play flag football to this day. And I started playing quarterback and throwing to my older brother. And then he caught one of the balls. He goes, "That's that CC. That's that Carroll Connection." So then years later, when I created this, that name just kind of popped up, and I was like, "Wow,
Yeah.
that makes so much sense." But I think a lot of our battles stemmed from like sports, like whether it's baseball or football, just always kind of competitively going at each other and wanting to be better. Like it
Right.
was like I hit puberty, so I'm faster than you now, or like I got a few inches on you now, and like now he's taller than me. But like that stuff, like always kind of was there,
Yeah.
especially being raised in the household of just all boys pretty much and just like
Yeah.
constantly butting heads, like playing sports, like
Mhm.
that aggression was always like there. But as we've gotten older, like I love, like I said, we still play flag football. I love picking my brother on my team because like it's almost this weird like telekinesis like vibe. Like he just knows where to be, and I just know where to find him on certain things. That I just this connection that we have that I don't have with other people.
For
And it's like
sure.
that's my brother, and it's like that
Yeah.
really does matter. So it's important for me to always like speak on family dynamic, but specifically when people have siblings, the value of a sibling, because a lot of time they
Yeah.
are our first friend. And I think it's really great that you've been able to have that experience with your sister and been able
Yeah.
to grow with her instead of grow like apart from each other. Because that does happen in people's families. So it's
I know, yeah.
scary when that can happen.
For sure, and I feel like I learned a lot from her because she was older, so I would see, like, how she would get in trouble, and I'd be like, "Ooh, okay, I know not to do that next time." So it was cool because we definitely learned a lot from each other. I'm
Yeah.
grateful to have her. Like,
Yeah,
I'm glad we're close.
it's definitely a blessing to have a sibling, especially when
Yeah.
you're able to be close with them. Like I said, kind of progressing with this, I'm interested to dive into a little bit of your childhood, and
Yeah.
specifically whether it was like a sport, whether it was specific hobbies, kind of things that you did in order to like make friends growing up.
Yeah, for sure. So I grew up more of a dancer. So I danced for like about 12 years of my life. I was a competitive dancer. That's a different kind of thing, but yeah, and I also did musicals. Like I was part of the musicals in high school. I was very into the arts,
Mhm.
like very creative kid. Like I've always wanted to is to create up like dances and like I ended up being a teacher and I choreograph now. Like that's kind of like my little like side passion that I like to do. But yeah, I just kinda dove into the arts. I think it's a good way to express yourself, especially when you're younger. It's a good way to move. I always felt like it was kinda like my outlet.
Yeah, did you kind of have any choice into dance, like, or to play other sports, or was it just kind of like naturally as you got introduced to dance, like you kind of fell in love with it?
Yeah, it was like my sister and I started when we were younger. I think I was like 7 or 8, and then we stopped for a little bit, and then I went back into it. I think it was one of those where I saw my cousins doing it, and everyone was like a dancer, and I was like, I don't know, like maybe I'll try this. And my sister went into gymnastics, so it was kind of similar, like a little different enough
Mhm.
where like I could, you know, strive to be better or like be competitive and like have a little more I don't know. You
Yeah,
know what I
no,
mean?
that's making sense. What
Yeah.
when you say competitive dance, like kind of like for people who might not know, like
Yeah.
what do you mean by competitive dancing?
Yeah, so I would be a part of a competition team, and I danced at Rosemary School of Dance, and we would have to take specific classes. Like I would have to take tap, jazz, ballet, technique, and then ballet just to be on the team. And we would go and we would train all year, and we would come up with solos, or you would do like small group numbers, and then you would compete against wherever you go. So like it could be like Massachusetts people or like Rhode Island people. You would go to like all different places. And it was really cool because I found a lot of my friends through dance because it's one of those kind of sports where like you are expressing like such a part of yourself. Like when you're dancing, it's almost like acting. So for a lot of it, it's it's very like intimidating sometimes because when you put yourself out there or like when you put something that you create or something that's like so vulnerable, it's hard to like kind of, you never know how people are going to respond.
Yeah, I was actually gonna like that was kind of like my next lead up question
Yeah.
was essentially was like with dance, it could be extremely emotional when you're putting on performance because it's art,
Mhm.
but it's also sport because you're also competing, obviously, and you're exerting a lot of energy into this and a lot of time and practice. So it's like finding that balance between like competitively like exerting yourself but emotionally expressing yourself at the same time to perform at a high level,
Yeah.
I can imagine is like can be a very difficult thing. Was there any like specific like genre or style of dance that you kind of maybe gravitated to more than others?
Yeah, I was definitely like a big tap person. Like that was always been my kind of thing. I was just really good at it. People used to say I should do drums because I was good with my like moving and like rhythmic because my dad's actually really into music. So he like mixes, he's like kind of a DJ. He does that on the side for like his own creative expression. And so I grew up like listening to music, listening to rhythm, like figuring out what beats to hit and what beats not to hit. And I think it kind of just portrayed into me being really good at tap for that reason of just having those like syncopated like beats and rhythms and stuff.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense that something like that would kind of correlate and translate into dance and creating that rhythm because definitely have to have rhythm to be good at dancer.
Yeah.
Like I would not say that I have great rhythm. I can let's say if there's a nice song at a wedding or something, I could get out there and do something, but competitively dancing, I just do not have the mobility and flexibility to ever
Yeah.
do something like that. And I mean, it's kudos to you for having that too. That is like such a
Thank you.
unique skill set to have, and not a lot of people are good at dancing, and it takes a lot of athleticism to be able to do something like that.
Yeah.
Did you have any like maybe training like regimen for something like that? Because obviously you have to be in pretty good shape to kind of perform at a high level sometimes. So like was there like a set practice schedule? Was there maybe training exercises that you performed? What was kind of like that process for getting ready for something like that?
Yeah, for sure. So it definitely took up like a lot of my childhood. Like I was at the studio probably every single day of the week except for Sundays. Like it just took up a lot of time. So I would go from school, like right home or to change and eat really quick. And then I would go to dance until like 9 o'clock. And then I would like in between, like we'd have like 30 minutes of break or something like that. I would do my homework. So half the time I was always on the go. Like I
Mhm.
was very much just like always in the car, always doing something, always on the go. So it was definitely like a really not like stressful, but it was a lot like for a kid, like to go through all that. And like I look back now and like I've struggled with like doing too much at once because I was like in that mindset of constantly having to be busy when I was younger that like it portrayed when I was an adult that if I wasn't busy, I was like, wait a second, like then I'm being lazy. I don't have like I have all this time. Like why am I not using it? So it was really interesting how like that like having that structure and like having that when I was younger, like kind of like gravitated towards when I was an adult, like
Yeah,
how I
I could
viewed
actually
life.
really resonate with something like that because
Yeah.
when I lost sports, like specifically like more senior year of high school, when football ended, I had not played baseball anymore. I kind of gave that up. I didn't have anything.
Right.
And that honestly led kind of into like a spiral where I got into like drugs and alcohol, where I wasn't as like focused on performing. I've always been like pretty much my whole like schooling experience was just like you go to school, go to practice, you do your homework, repeat. And
Mhm.
then as I got older, you include the gym into that. You got to like prepare for football season, you got to work out, you got to go to the training. And when you take that away and you don't fill it with something, that's when things can get very dangerous,
Yeah.
because when I removed that, I started to senior year, start to gravitate towards, oh, the cool kids are drinking, everyone's partying and doing this. And it's like, I want to do that. I've never really
Right.
done that. And you start to lean towards that experience, and it kind of follows you into college, where college is a culture where you could easily fall into the trap of partying and stuff like that. And it becomes like negative to the sense of like your kind of maybe your life purpose or your goals, your aspirations. And for me, filling that space with a podcast for me
Yeah.
was that creative outlet that I needed. And when you don't have that space, because like with sports, it's a lot of the time our first introduction to meeting friends, to creating habits, to learning life skills. And when you take that away, for a lot of kids, it's our identity growing up.
For
Like we're
sure.
telling our friends, oh, like I'm a football player or I'm a dancer.
Mhm.
And that's like kind of your identity. So when you lose that identity, sometimes we're not taught how to replace that identity as we get older. So it can become difficult. And I think it's interesting to see kind of like what you're saying there, where some of your regimen or your scheduling or how
Mhm.
you're consistent, you feel like you're not doing something, maybe derives from something like that. And I could actually really resonate with something like that, 'cause I
Yeah.
feel the same way a lot of the time.
Yeah, it's almost like you forget, like, how busy you were as a kid, and I'm like, "Wow." I was like, "Why do I feel like this sometimes?" Like, I almost had to really sit with myself, be like, "Why do I feel like I'm being lazier just because I have free space?" Like, wait a second, it's okay to have, downtime. It's okay to have, like, take those mental health days. It's okay to not do anything. Sometimes you need a rest day. And I feel like as a kid, like, I did have my rest days, but it wasn't the same. Like, it was more of like if I was at home, I would be going over my choreo or like, learning this new dance, stretching, like really focused on everything else or doing schoolwork that I missed the whole week. Like I never like really like relaxed until I got older and I had to almost teach myself how to relax.
Yeah. And I don't think enough of us learn how to relax. And then
Yeah.
you brought up, we've talked about meditation and stuff like that. And that's
Mhm.
like a huge skill for people, if you don't know how to meditate, to learn how to meditate, because it creates a space where you can relax. And it also allows for thoughts to come in where you can start thinking about things in a different way. And we aren't taught how to relax. It's
No,
almost
yeah.
looked at as like a negative thing, like you were saying. And it's like you're being lazy. Like, what are you
Mhm.
doing? Like, you should be doing something. And I mean, even thinking about it just right now, like even the way I look at my podcast sometimes, I'm not doing something towards it. We're adding equipment. It's like you're being stagnant. You're being lazy. What are you doing? You're not growing. And it's like
Yeah.
it's almost like this growing like culture in our society, this hustle culture,
Mhm.
is forced so much into us when we're young. And it might not even be, it's not our parents' faults. It might be more of a society issue where like we're constantly on the go and we don't have a second to kind of reflect on like, do I even like this sport? Like, do I
Yeah.
want to do this? Is this like actually serving me in a higher purpose to where I want to go in life? And obviously at a certain age when you're young, I can imagine as a parent, you want to have your kids going and getting them and learning them and teaching them. But as we're getting older, especially towards the high school, we sometimes don't have the skills to like form our own opinions and thoughts on things. And it's not until that college experience where we're like, oh shit, like we're on
Yeah.
our own right now. And that can be scary for a lot of people. And a lot of people do fail. So
Yeah.
it's definitely an interesting space when you talk about relaxation and like working hard and having goals and being like a very schedule oriented person. It's an interesting space with all that. I definitely want to keep progressing though with your life story here.
Yeah.
Getting towards like senior year, like high school experience. I can imagine, were you still dancing at that time? So you
Yeah.
got probably a lot of going on between dance, school. I don't know if you were working at the time, like if that is part of it, if you're working for the dance studio, maybe, I don't know. Like probably a
Yeah.
lot of things going on. Then everyone's favorite question, college starts to come into the
Yeah.
picture. How do you balance a lot of that? And then did you go to college? Did you not go to college? Why not? Kind of walk me through that stuff.
Yeah, so I went to college. So my major was actually in biology. I wanted to be a marine biologist, like through high school and kind of into college. And then I took a bio class in college and I absolutely flunked it. I was like, wow, this is really hard. So I ended up taking a psychology class because you need like those extra credits. And I fell in love with psychology. So yeah, I actually changed my major and I have a degree in psychology. Um, but yeah, it's just like one of those things where I had a really hard time, as we were talking about, like kind of balancing because when you graduate high school, there's not a lot of dance programs for adults. A lot of people don't like kind of realize that unless you're doing it like professionally. There's not a lot of places to go to dance or like just to get that creative outlook. But I think the way I kind of perceived it was my senior year of high school. I choreographed my first musical that I ever did. Someone gave me an amazing opportunity, and I've been doing it ever since. So I was able to keep dance in my life, but I was no longer the performer. I was more of the teacher, and I was put into like a different role.
So the musical stuff was introduced senior year of high
Yeah.
school. How did you get approached to do something like that?
So dancers a lot of the time get approached by like people in musicals because they're like, "Hey, we need like good dancers to be in it." And I'm like, "Yeah, sure. I've never done a musical before. Like, why not? I don't really sing. Like I was in chorus, but I wasn't really like I wouldn't say I'm a singer. But yeah, I did so I went to East Providence High School, and I think the first show I ever did was what is the show? I can't even think of it, to be honest. It was so long ago. But anyways, ever since then, oh, Phantom of the Opera. That was the first show I ever did. And I fell in love with it. I just fell in love with theater because it kind of combined all the things I loved. Like I loved watching movies. I loved people who can sing and dance and act. And it was a fun environment to like kind of go into.
So now you kind of you still continue to this day, or like
Yeah, so to this day, I still choreograph. I'm currently directing a show, which is like kind of a new step for me. I've never done that before.
is it something that you could talk about? Is it like
Yeah,
kind of
no,
okay?
of course.
I just want to know in case it's not like it's secret. I don't know. I just got to be careful sometimes.
No, I appreciate it.
What are you choreographing currently?
Yeah, so currently I'm working with Emerald City Theatricals, and we're putting on the production of Beauty and Beast.
Nice. Where is that going to be done?
Yeah, so it's going to be at the Orpheum, which is in Foxborough. So it's going to go up October, I think, 3rd through 6th.
Oh, it's coming up really soon.
Yeah, so I've been kind of in that like hectic, like kind of vibe of just like tech week and like teaching and choreographing and directing. And it's definitely a new chapter, but I'm really grateful for the opportunity.
When does something like that start? Because like I can imagine
Yeah.
a lot has to go into that to get everyone on the same page for something like that.
Oh, for sure. So the way we kind of run things, we only have a month to put up
Wow.
a show. Yeah, so we started rehearsals probably I think it was like the first week of September. And then we've been rehearsing for 4 weeks, and then we put up the show. So it's a very fast like turnaround pace. But it's also just like you have to be so structured. Like I have to choreograph the dances like in advance. Like I have to know what I'm doing before I get to rehearsal, just so that like the amount of time, because we only have like I think it's like 4.5 hours for rehearsal per day. So I have to make sure that I know what I'm doing in order for them to really succeed, and we can make a beautiful show.
Is it volunteer based too?
Yeah,
Yes. Okay.
for sure.
And how many years have you been doing that?
Since 2017.
And
So
if recently you've gotten to the directing role.
yeah.
So before, were you just were you part of the musicals?
Yeah, so I would choreograph, and then I would also be a dancer in the musicals.
Nice. And did you find that opportunity on your own, or was it just like one of those where it's like you just know someone that it's like, hey, this might be a great opportunity for you, and just went like that?
Yeah, it was one of those where we started at the middle school,
Mhm.
and someone was like, "Hey, like do you mind like to choreograph this number?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." Like I mean, I've always been like a dancer. Like I don't know if I can come up with routines. Like that's not really my specialty. I was a little like hesitant about it. And then she was like, "Why don't you just try it?" And we did Aladdin, and I loved it. And it was really hard for me to honestly like take a step back, especially from being like on stage and like being the performer and being told what to do, to now step into this like leadership role of like, okay, now I am the person that has to tell them how to do. And I also have this responsibility to make sure that they're comfortable, and like also giving them something that's challenging while also making sure that they look good. Like I would never put someone on stage not thinking that they're not going to look great.
Yeah, you got to prepare them. And like
Yeah.
that's interesting this might be something worth diving into, is like how you developed some of those leadership skills. Like
Yeah.
was it developed over time? Like have you been learning kind of on the job? Like what kind of goes into being like a good leader for someone who's choreographing or running a musical?
Yeah, I definitely think it was definitely a learning curve, but I had like a lot of support and community around me that I was able to ask a lot of questions, which was really helpful. In my dance studio, like Bethany is the owner of the studio, and she's always been so supportive of like everything I've ever done. And like I've learned a lot from them and just like learning all those aspects. But yeah, it's definitely I think it's finding the balance. A lot of choreographers have a difficult time of finding the balance between like how to make something really difficult while also making it look good. Because a lot of the time people will push you so hard, but then it's almost too challenging where people will start to be like, I can't do this, I'm gonna fail. It's really hard. But I think once you really find that balance of like, where's the fine line? How can I push you? How can I strive you to be better while also giving you the encouragement to like step forward? Because I know you can do it. Like, you can definitely do it. You just have to really change your mindset about it.
Yeah, you nailed that, honestly. Because like when I think about some of the best coaches or teachers that I've ever had, it's that fine line of encouragement, but also pushing.
Yeah,
Because nothing grows in a space where it's just constant encouragement. Like you're not gonna if you're feeling super comfortable and validated in what you do, like why would you want to do more? Like you're like, I'm
right.
doing enough. But when you're being encouraged and validated while also being pushed a little bit, it's like, you did really great. Like, but we could do some more here. And giving them examples or providing them examples of where they can elevate their skills. That is a sign of a great leader because you're really taking the steps to develop that person in their skill set. And not a lot of people learn how to be a great leader. And we need more of great leaders in the world to help, whether it's going all the way back to teachers in school helping their students to coaches on the athletic fields or having someone in your position where you're choreographing and helping your dancers and performers get to where they need to get to. Like
Yeah.
that is a huge thing that we're kind of lacking in society is having someone step into those leadership roles that can actually encourage people and also push because like you said it's a very fine line
Yeah.
between that and not everyone learns how to develop that,
No,
so
and
it's interesting.
I've definitely seen a lot of people like burn out because they've been pushed too hard, like so fast. A lot of people like give up and they're like, I can't do this anymore. Like it's been too much. And I can relate because it's like, yeah, I understand like how you can get burned out from this. It's a really strenuous kind of job that I'm asking you to do, you know? Like it's hard. And I think people forget that sometimes. It's like you have to realize that you have to give yourself a break.
Yeah, it goes back to that point of relaxation and
Yeah.
establishing that. Sometimes you need someone to also tell you to take a break, because
Yeah.
especially if you're someone coming from the background that we kind of talked about, even with ourselves, where you're constantly on the go, sometimes you need that coach or that teacher or that leader to step in and be like, all right, we're going to take a break here. We're going to reset. We're going to relax, give our
Mhm.
bodies what they need, and then re-tackle this. And I think that's like super important because we're not seeing that too much in a
No,
society that's
yeah.
very go 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 and very performance driven.
Mhm.
So people want results, which I mean I get that, but to get the best results, sometimes it is that step back. Sometimes it is the encouragement that you're doing enough. Let's take the break today and we'll take it back up tomorrow and we're going to work on X, Y, and Z and get to there. And I think that, like you said, is perfect. I think it's a great example of developing leadership skills. I want to continue with this though, kind of going back a little bit
Yeah.
in the sense of going back to the college experience. Because one, I also had issues with biology and I even had some issues with psychology. There's actually, I think I was going to go criminal justice and then I went like accounting finance. And I wish I had a better experience with the psychology class, and maybe that would have taken me down psychology. 'Cause
Yeah.
looking at my podcast, I would have been like, yeah, it would have been great to go down like a mental health counselor or something. But here we are. That class, it was like my worst like grade. Like I think it was like a C plus or something. It was like my worst class that I had in college. Like I was like a pretty good B to A student, but for some reason, like I don't know if it was the professor, I don't know if it was me, like that
Yeah.
psychology class like kicks my ass. So I'm interested to know kind of what it was like for you to go through some of those psychology classes and like looking at the industry and obviously where you went now, you've kind of taken like a little bit of a turn with that. So it's like
Yeah.
interested to see that. So I'm kind of interested in that path essentially.
Yeah, of course. Well, like I said, like that first class just really I've always been very curious about how the mind works. And it's just something that I've always just like had a passion for. And in those classes, I just like really dove like really hardcore like into like all the different reasons like why the brain works the way it does. And it just like kind of makes me very excited to learn about it. And I went into the field like after I graduated. I graduated during COVID. So it was just, I had like a virtual graduation. Like I watched my picture come up and I was like, cool, I graduated college. But yeah, so I ended up going into the field. I did IPT therapy for a little bit, which I worked with kids with autism and teaching them how to, speak and use their voice and things like that. And it just like really showed me a different side of like therapy. And I wasn't really agreeing with like kind of what I was being told to do sometimes without going like
Yeah,
really too
yeah.
into it. But it was really hard. And I think I had to almost realize that, okay, like this is not what I want to do. And I had to like almost take a step back because I was like, wait a second, like this is what my degree is in. Like we should be doing something with my degree. Like why am I not doing this? But morally, I couldn't continue with that job. And so I ended up quitting. And for a while, I always just kind of thought, I'm like, how is my degree like kind of going to help me? Like, how is it going to, like incorporate it with what I do now? And honestly, I use my degree almost every single day, like without even realizing. Like when I talk to people, it's having that like skill of like listening and like understanding and also holding space for someone to be vulnerable. And like with dance is a really hard on your mentally. Like it's a lot about physique and like what you look like and who you are. Like a lot of dancers don't have tattoos. So like me having tattoos while dancing was like a whole thing for a while because people are like, "Whoa, okay." Cuz like you almost want to look very alike. Like a lot of places, like when you see the Rockettes, they all are the same height, or they have to be the same height. They have to look the same. And now, obviously, like the world's changing and dance is changing, but it's hard on the mental, like stature of dancers to go through that. And I almost use that. I always talk about that in my dance classes. I'm like, I'm here to push you, but I'm not here to judge you. And I think that's really hard for people to do sometimes, especially dance teachers, because you're brought up in such a different way where it's like very structured. Everything has to look the same. Like your feet have to look the same. Like your body has to look the same. And realistically, like that's not, we're all different people.
Yeah, I'm really glad that one huge respect for you for deciding to leave an industry that wasn't serving you anymore. Because a
Yeah.
lot of people will keep doing jobs that they really don't like doing. And I was kind of telling you off podcast like my story and how this came to be, and
Yeah.
I really resonate with your story because like that was something that I had to go through. Was in a place doing something I just didn't feel was right for me, and I didn't agree with everything that the company was doing, and didn't like the situation that I was in, and I had to make an uncomfortable decision
Hmm.
to leave. And when you do that with no plan, it's scary. Like it's like, how am I gonna figure this out? Like you don't know where to kind of go. And for me, ultimately went back into the industry and with a better job. I'm really happy with. But I was able to use that time period, and I didn't look for a job right away. I
Yeah.
went back. I did like an old job for a little bit just to get some money and bills. But I waited for the right opportunity, and during that time period was when I created the podcast. And the podcast has filled the space that I was looking for since I lost football. It became my thing, like kind of like goes into this like my identity almost. But
Yeah.
it created that meaning that I was searching for that maybe my job wasn't fulfilling and maybe it could never fulfill. It just added that more to it. And I still take the things that I've learned, whether it's my work, whether it's sports, and apply it to the podcast. And even goes into what you're saying. I've had to learn a lot of stuff like in that space of psychology of creating space for people,
Right.
interviewing them, and like respecting where they want to go with their emotions. I've had people cry on the podcast talk about stuff. Like I had to learn how to like to handle that. And like I've come to an understanding where it's like they feel comfortable enough to even open up on that level with me. And that is amazing that I've been able to even create a space like that. So it's like learning how to create those spaces for people in different environments is huge. And I've had to learn that even
Yeah.
from outside looking in. So I can imagine you taking those skills and applying it to what you're doing has been really validating because you might not be working in that field essentially what it's like scripted in the school systems,
Mhm.
but you're still applying what you learned to what you're doing currently. And I think that's super valuable.
No, for sure. And I think a lot of the time people forget that people just want to be heard. A lot of the time people just want you to listen to them. There's been a lot of instances where I'm just sitting and I'm just like holding space for someone, and I'll be sitting next to someone on a bench and they'll just start talking. And it's because I allowed that opportunity to happen. And of course, like energetically, like I allowed it to happen as well. But it's really interesting that a lot of the times, like people just want to be heard. They want their story to be out there to listen. And like that's what you do here. Like you let people tell their stories.
Yeah, and that's been like the always the message was like
Yeah.
when I first started was I think even back in the intro, part of the reason I never even changed the intro was because like I just feel like it really represented like what I was going for at the time. And I think I mentioned I was like 23 or 24 in the intro. Obviously, I'm not that now, but like I kept it because the energy that I had when I created that intro, I think really represents what like the podcast is. I definitely was swearing way too much. I was like so energetic about it though. I was like this fucking shit, fuck, and I was like, I low key little bit cringed when I listened to it recently. I was like, why did I do that? Like, definitely didn't need to swear as much, but I was really coming into this kind of like stage where I was kind of like revolting against what the mainstream was like
Yeah.
telling me to be. But the message was clear though towards the end of it, where I was like, just talking to people, getting their message out there, really going with kind of what you're saying is people do want to be heard. It's just up to the like us as the listener to hear them
Yeah.
and like actually not like just always jump to the next thing either. Like hear them, validate them, and sometimes you could build off that, and that's what creates great conversation. Is where it's not so much of me like asking you question for question for question. Obviously, it's somewhat of an interview,
Mm,
but like there's room for the conversation. There's space for the conversation to deviate off like that script kind of that I was telling you in the
yeah.
beginning. Like there's space for us to keep going like this. Like this wasn't really part of the script, but
Mhm.
here we are having the conversation because there's space for that. And it takes time to learn those skills. And I think it's important that we're teaching these things. And it sounds like you were able to get some of that, not only just from like your life experience, but from school. And to build a little bit with this, I'm actually really curious to like how you ended up into creating your small business and your brand.
Yeah.
Like, how do you make that jump from school, quitting the job, and then deciding, hey, this is where I actually want to go with this?
Yeah, so I like to call it the dark night of the soul. I feel like everyone kind of goes through a part in their life where they've almost hit like rock bottom, basically, and they're like, "Wow, okay, shit can't get any darker than this." And that happened to me after college. I went through a really bad breakup. I had to move home with like my dog. It was just like a really bad situation, and I was just like in a rut. I was like, "Okay, cool, this is great." And then it almost like it forced me to look at myself because I kept asking the question, why is all this happening to me? Like, why does the universe hate me? Why are all these things happening to me? But I realized that the only person that like I can hold accountable is myself. And like that's a really hard lesson to learn sometimes because you don't want to look at your darkness. Like you don't want to look at those shadow aspects of yourself. It's something that you almost have to in order to grow. And so I went through a whole healing journey for like over a year and a half. Like I went like really dived into, learning about Buddhism, getting into meditation. I did a lot of like hiking. I went to Kripalu, which is like a yoga retreat. And that was really what shifted my whole aspect and like kind of pushed me forward into this new kind of transition that I'm going through. And I did this meditation and I will never forget it. It was like through the 7 chakras of your body, which is kind of just like aligning them. And I had this whole like crazy experience like through it that I couldn't like even explain to anybody because I was like, I sound crazy. Like, this is insane. Like, what am I looking at? Like, what am I seeing? And I just found a community that was like, "No, like, you're okay, like, this is normal. Like, welcome to, like, this whole different aspect of life." And, yeah, I think it just, like, really pushed me into getting into herbalism, and with my dad being he's always, like, made teas growing up, and we've always had, like, a natural garden, like, we pick tomatoes, we have it year-round, like, I've always had a green thumb. So I've always been into, like, plants and all that stuff, and I think just having that kind of almost shifted me into that. And so I ended up getting my herbalism certification through Pharmacy Herbs, which is a place in Providence. And they have like a little store that you can go and grab tea from. And it really kind of forced me to get into nature because I've always been an adamant hiker. Like I love being outside. I always feel like nature is very healing for the body. So like if I'm having a rough day, I'll go for like a hike. Like that's just kind of how I cope with things. And so it was almost like herbalism was that step towards almost making that something that I can share with others. And yeah, so I created Virgo's Brew, which is like my little company. And it started off with just, making like little teas and like tinctures and just selling them. So I would make them for like relaxation or for like women's health. And like, you should drink these teas for this time. And like, I sold them at like little stores and things like that. But yeah, and I think as I've been through my journey and I've been like learning more and growing more and developing more, it's more shifted into a brand and less of just my teas. So I'm diving more into salivotherapy, which it's called like forest bathing. So basically, it's just kind of how nature and like being outdoors like really heals the body, like physically, mentally, emotionally. And so I'm kind of on that like kind of path. So I want to do more of like guided meditations and like going guided hiking, where like we start with, something that you feel like you need to release or you had a really bad day. And we go through nature and you're just listening to the birds or like feeling the earth or just like listening to the water rising and just taking a minute to just be so present in the moment. I feel like people forget how really powerful nature is. It's all around us.
Oh, and I love hiking. I haven't done
Yeah.
as much as I wanted to in the last couple of years, but a lot of that was like I had a bad hamstring injury playing flag football. Like
Oh,
just
yeah.
getting too old. It's getting better actually. I'm actually really impressed with myself lately. Not to like toot my own horn, but like the hiking aspect though is
Yeah.
like is I always explain like hiking and I make this comparison to like actual life, and it's kind of corny and cliche, but I'll still do it. Um, as I've done a lot of hikes, one of the things that I've learned and been able to translate to my life is like it's really corresponds to, like your life journey in the sense where like you're going up the hill or the mountain and get steep, you get tired, you gotta have your water breaks, moments of relaxation, you gotta sometimes eat to replenish the calories that you're burning. Sometimes you're like, damn, I don't really want to do this.
Yeah.
This shit sucks. Like you look up, you're like, I shouldn't have looked up, and you're just like struggling. And all of a sudden, you find yourself at the top of the mountain. You're happy, you're excited, you're like, ha, I made it. But one thing when you look out that's extremely exciting sometimes, but also frightening, is how many more mountains there are to climb.
Yeah.
And it's not just the one that you're on, there's more to climb. There's way more out there than you can even count sometimes. And I take that into my own life as where it's never just about climbing that one mountain. There's always going to be another mountain to climb. It's the continual pursuit of climbing each mountain and keep doing that. It's just the keep doing it aspect of it. And even the down journey, like there's down moments in life too where you're going down the hill. Sometimes it's steep and it's sketchy and like you don't want to go down, but you have to go down to get to the bottom. And you get to the bottom and you're like, wow, I feel really cool, blessed. Everything's balanced almost, where
Mhm.
you're on level ground, but you know you're still gonna have to climb another mountain on another day.
Yeah.
And that's kind of something I've like picked up of just hiking several mountains. I've kind of made my own little twist with it and like kind of applied it to my life. It's somewhat corny and cliche, but like I think it really resonates with kind of the message that we kind of push inside and that I'm trying to push is like this continual pursuit of like climbing the mountain, doing the difficult thing. Like and then when you're getting into the nature aspect, it's like so healing where you don't have cell service. I mean, it's great to have all trails, like the
Yeah,
huge
of course,
blessing to
yeah.
know where you're going, but you're not answering texts. I mean, except for my buddy, he'll be on a mountain and somehow get cell reception. People are giving him calls and
Of
FaceTimes. I'm
course.
like, I can't even get anything. My thing is like dead. But you're not doing anything but being there with that person or by
Mhm.
yourself and you're in the moment. So rarely are we actually in the moment of things where you could take in the kind of things you're saying of the birds, of like the brook in the woods, going
Mhm.
up the mountain, the sounds, like especially this time of the year as we're entering, the leaves changing, the breeze, like everything's crisp, everything smells good, like
Yeah.
this actual real air. Like you're not hearing cars going constantly. It's just silence, nature sounds, conversations, and you get really deep into conversations, except for the moments where you're like your heart rate's going really high, you're climbing the mountain. It's like, all right, that's when you know you've hit the point where it's like the hard part where everyone just stops talking.
No,
It's like
for sure,
we're
yeah.
we're just going. We're not talking, we're just going. And there's like you can apply that to your life. There's moments where you can't be talking
Yeah,
and yapping all the time. You just gotta just go. You gotta just go. And there's so many life lessons that you could take from hikes. And
for
I think it's
sure.
really cool that you also enjoy hikes and you kind of are wanting to incorporate that with your
Yeah.
brand. I think that's like unique. I've never heard of someone that wants to do something like that.
Yeah, thank you. It's kind of like a new thing that I really want to incorporate because I actually just went to Acadia National Park and I hiked like a lot of really cool hikes and trails there. And I did the Beehive Trail, which it's a lot of like climbing, like ladders, and you just have to like climb through rocks. It's like really, really treacherous, but it was really, really cool. And it almost made me realize that like, hey, people do this because they want to, but it's also something that makes a difference. And I think incorporating it of like how I shift my mindset and also just being so present that I can't think about all like the daily things that are bothering me or like things I have to do. It's just like nature is so healing and I think people forget that.
Yeah, I've definitely experienced certain hikes where it's like, holy shit, you can't even think about anything
Yeah,
else.
other
Like,
than like getting up this mountain.
yeah,
Yeah.
one of the ones like to this day, like I think Mount Washington's an amazing mountain to climb. I think everyone should climb it if they ever get the chance. But that shit kicks ass. It's
Yeah.
like I remember me and my friend to this day. I don't know if you've ever hiked Mount Washington. Uh,
No, I've been
high,
there, but I never
highly
hiked it.
recommend it. Did you drive up?
Yeah.
I'm sorry where I'm going with this.
Oh gosh.
Where I see the bumper stickers of this car climbed Mount Washington. Me and my buddy still laugh about those to this day. So I
Yeah.
apologize if you have one of those.
No, I don't. It's
Good.
okay.
Definitely don't. 'Cause I don't think those are deserved. It's
No, because you didn't climb it.
didn't
You drove
climb
it.
it because like I remember like going up like just like certain parts and then getting to like where you're almost at the top and you're literally climbing rocks to get up to where
Hmm.
everyone's parking basically. It's like holy shit. I remember people crying next to me. I'm like how
Yeah.
the fuck we're almost there. Like you just gotta go now. Like
Yeah.
you made it this far. Like just gotta get to the rest of it. Like but that one that one kicked my ass because I remember my legs were hurting. Like sometimes if my boots are too tight, my feet start to go numb in certain areas, and like
Yeah.
fucking hate that. And I got new boots, but like that one like made me get new boots because like, I was like, holy shit! Like remember my calves are getting like tight. I'm like, holy, I don't know if I'm gonna make this one. I remember
Yeah,
telling my
no,
friend, I was
like
like, I don't know if I'm gonna make this one, but like you always make it.
mhm.
You always make it. It might take a little longer some days, but like it's it's something very very healing about. I mean,
Yeah.
I even have this Snapchat memory. If I remember after the podcast, I'll show you.
Mhm.
But when I started meditating, I would literally picture this like area of the like it was like the downwards parts of the mountain where and it was like fall. It's like one of my first hikes that I really like did before I got into hiking with my friend. And it was just like this river and all the leaves were yellow around us. We're just sitting by rocks
Mm.
and just like sitting by the water. And like when I would meditate, I'd literally put myself in that place. Cause like the feeling that I felt in that place was unlike anything I've experienced. Like I'm fresh out of
Yeah.
quitting my job. My friends also quit his job. We have nothing to do tomorrow. We're basically we don't have any plans, but like we're so present in the moment and like just like happy to be there. And like it was such a unique experience also because like I remember us being our first hike, we only had one backpack. We got made fun of for only having one backpack.
Oh gosh.
And he had shoes, I had shitty boots, and I was like, "You sure we don't need like winter gloves?" He's like, "Nah, dude, we don't need them." Get to the top, it's like snowing.
Shivering, yeah.
Yeah, I was like, "Oh my!" And it was like October, so like we didn't really know it could be snowing, but like got up there and it just made everything so cool and a unique experience that led to that moment. But that's what I was thinking of as we were talking with that. Is like that spot and like being able to like bring myself to that spot in
Yeah.
meditation and how healing that actually was for me to like visualize that and have a point of reference. So when
Mhm.
I did meditate, I actually could think about something and visualize it for myself. And I think doing that for people will dramatically improve their lives. And I think that that
Yeah.
plan that you have for yourself is actually going to be really successful as long as you stick to it and actually want to continue to do it.
Yeah.
I think it'll be really great.
Thank you. And also it's just like it's so easy. Like outdoors right there,
It's
Like
free.
anybody can walk
Well, kind of.
outside. Yeah. Well, anybody can walk outside.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be like this huge hike that you have to go on to have this like crazy like sense of peace. Just go sit in your backyard under a tree and just close your eyes and like listen to what's around you. What can you hear? What do you feel? Feel the grass. Like listen to the birds, listen to the wind. Like feel the rustling, you hear a squirrel. Like there's so many things that you can just almost turn off your brain and just like focus on your senses, the five senses that you have. And like it really like calms people. Like when you think about it and like you can do it anywhere. It's just having that like almost guidance to like show people that like you can change your mindset in like a split of an instant. If I'm having a bad time at work, I will go outside for like 2 minutes just to ground myself to recenter because I know like that's where I can almost take time to just be like, okay, like I got this. I just need to take a minute.
100. I've actually been doing
Yeah.
that at work a lot. Is like just going on walks. Like
Yeah.
they, the campus that I work at is just it's like a giant walking area, and like they do a good job of like encouraging people to do that. But I've
Mhm.
been like, I never else was like, I'm not gonna walk outside. Fuck that. Like
Yeah.
I don't want to do that. I'm working. I'm gonna get sweaty. What the hell? And I was like, I would just save it towards like the end of my day. So if I get a little sweaty, it's whatever because I'm just gonna go home soon. But just to walk outside and then coming back to my desk, like, I feel better. Like it's
Yeah.
not only just like the nature thing, but like you're also getting some exercise too. It's good for the
Mhm.
body. Like I usually do morning workouts before I go to the office, but like getting that extra steps in, like it really does make a difference to like be outside and just like kind of detach a little bit from the work stress that you're going through. So it's something as simple as that, just like going outside during even a work day, you
Yeah,
know?
for sure. And like it's also like somatic movement where like your body holds on to a lot of trauma and tension without even realizing it. Like if you're having a rough day, like sometimes my shoulders will start hurting and it's because like that's where I'm holding all that tension because when you get like upset like you tighten up.
Yeah.
And so it's movement, which is hiking and also like the somatic movement of like stretching and like releasing that like pent up like tension and trauma sometimes. Like you can release a lot of things that way.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of to go back with this point. I don't
Yeah.
know how comfortable you are to go into some of that yoga stuff.
Oh,
Like
yeah, for
that
sure.
sounds like it was very transformative, and like you obviously don't have to get too personal with your experience. Like obviously it's your
Yeah.
experience, but I would love to know more of kind of what happened.
Yeah, for sure. So I went through like a huge awakening. Like that's kind of like what I like to call it basically. And I was just laying down and I felt almost like a huge release. Like my whole body was shaking and like I couldn't understand and I started crying and I had no idea why. I was like, what is happening? Like this is scary. But it's like I didn't realize how much tension I held in my body. And like I struggle with the feeling of not being enough. And I feel like a lot of people can relate to that because it's just something that like society almost teaches you. And I think with dance, I was always like competitive. I was always like, I have to be the best. Like I'm competitive with these people. I was competitive with my family. I was competitive like a lot because that was just like who I was. And I think having that like release almost was like so relieving because I didn't realize how much I like held on to. It's almost like you forget of like, "Oh, wow, yeah, like, okay, my body is, like, holding on to this." Even though I've mentally let go of it, your body almost still holds the meaning of it. And so, like, going through that of, like, knowing that I am enough and that, like, I can do the things I put myself up to. It's really powerful.
Yeah,
Like
it definitely because I've had I forget what kind of experience, like what the wording was when I went to the Peruvian shaman that I was talking to you about. But I laid on the
Yeah.
table, had all the crystals on the chakras, and like kind of walked me through like this guided like meditation almost, and like the stuff that I was able to visualize with her, like walking me through, like kind of like it was almost like this path and like opening
Mhm.
doors and looking into the doors, like what do you see? And I was like, it's like just shit just comes. Like I don't even know how to explain it. It's
Yeah.
like you see things. It's like it's I was even thinking about it, gives me like,
It's
it's like
trippy
I don't
because you're
like
like, "Oh
it.
my
It's like
gosh."
it's, some of it's like not good stuff you're looking at. And it's like, oh, that's in there. Like, why is that there? And
Yeah.
it's like actually acknowledging it and unpacking some of that is like extremely validating. I even remember the one that really the one moment of it, and I'll share this because I don't think it's like bad. I think it was like really empowering. Was her pointing me out to the younger version of myself, and like I could picture the age. It was like me at like 7, like
Mm.
and like just scared, like in a corner, separated. It's like you have to grab his hand and take him with you. Like he is
Yeah.
you. Like you have to comfort him. And I was like, what the fuck? Like it is just weird. Like I could see myself like as a kid, and
Yeah.
like to visualize that, like someone who's scared, like doesn't know where to go, and you're you have to be your hero almost. You have to be
Mhm.
the person that you would have wanted as a kid in this sense, and like guide yourself out of this place and take him with you because
Yeah.
he is you. And it was like that was just trippy experience. It's
Yeah.
like you just can't can't really make that up. Like you just like they bring you down this path and like opening these different doors and this like that's like one of the last ones. I was like, what the it was just mind blowing
Yeah.
experience to have something like that. And it really was really healing, kind of like what you're saying, similar experience in the sense where it feels like you're releasing stuff. Like you're letting
Yeah.
go of like things that you didn't know you were holding on to this entire time. And it's to serve you better to go down this path of where you're trying to go. And
Mhm.
I think with the things that you're creating and the things that you're working on really is aligning yourself with this higher purpose, higher being. And it really resonates with me as someone who's been really curious about like awakenings or spirituality, or even like I've been even getting into like religion because it kind of relates to spirituality. Obviously, I don't get
Yeah.
into every weeds of religion, but I think this like calling to answer these questions, to talk about
Mhm.
these things has been super important. And someone like yourself really fits, I guess, the narrative of the stuff that I'm trying to talk about in this podcast, and I'm really
Yeah.
like grateful that you've been willing to dive into some of this. I want to, we are getting towards the end. I wanted to dive into like herbalism and like kind of like
Yeah.
explaining a little bit more of like what it is and how it can help people, and for people that might not know what it is.
For sure. So herbalism is kind of the study of plants.
Mhm.
So I learned a lot about how like things that grow in your backyard and how you can take it, like random things that grow, like mullein, for example. It's like this tall plant and it's super fuzzy and it grows everywhere. It's a weed, but you can use it to heal your throat. Like when you have a sore throat, you put it in tea, you just pick it, you dry it, and it heals your body. And so learning about all that stuff was so fascinating because I don't think people realize that, like, we have all the aspects around us to heal ourselves, and nature basically provides that for you. So, it's more of getting into the herbs and, like, picking the plants and how to process them, like, how to dry them, how to make them into teas and tinctures or things that you can digest in order to heal your body naturally, and less of all these chemicals that people take a lot of the time, you know? And, like, I, for one, like, it took me a while to, like, get off of all the things I was taking. Like, I took Advil, I took, like, aspirin, like, half the time when I had a headache, but, like, now I look and I'm like, "Okay, wait, like, let me take a second." Like, for immune system, you can take black seed oil, and, like, that helps your immune system, like, boost crazy, and it's, like, this one little thing that you can just drop in your mouth. Cool. And, like, it works. It's so fascinating because there's, like, scientific evidence that, like, herbs and, like, their properties and how they help you in your body, and I think I got into it because I feel like a lot of people don't know this, and it's like, I don't understand, like, a lot of people sometimes are like, "Organic stuff, like, really? Okay." Like, whatever. Like, a lot of people don't believe in it, but I think it's really important to, like, know, like, there's scientific evidence of, like, how this can help, how this can aid your body without putting all these, like, toxic chemicals from the government or wherever from
Yeah,
in your body.
it makes a lot of sense,
Yeah.
honestly. Like it, if you really think about it, and this might be like a trippy thought, but um, that we live in a world that would have all the answers and medicines that we need
Yeah.
on here. We don't have to create something new to fight it. Cause like it would make sense if like I'm like a higher being creating a world type of thing, that
Mhm.
all the answers are within the world. You
Yeah.
just have to figure it out. And to have something naturally occurring, 'cause you think about all the chemicals and stuff you're putting in your body for fighting like a cold or a headache. It's like it's fighting that, but like what else is it actually doing?
Right.
It's probably hurting you in some other aspect or an organ or something, versus something that's naturally growing that you could find anywhere. Just understanding the I guess the science behind it maybe, but
Mhm.
like understand that it has properties to heal those things just like that medicine does, without the negative, at least maybe the full negative aspects of it. Because we
Right.
maybe there are some negatives of plants that maybe you've discovered as you're going through this. But like, 'cause I can
Yeah.
imagine there's probably some bad things that certain
Yeah, for
plants do,
sure.
but
Like,
like
some plants are poisonous, like, I
yeah,
definitely stay away, but
but it's like that. So like it's gonna be less of the negative stuff, but
Mhm.
more of the positive stuff, and is doing pretty much the same thing. It's solving the same problem that you're trying to solve. So it's like
Yeah.
just going the way that we should have been going the entire time, instead of trying to progress so medically, which is great that we have. But I think we're also seeing it in this culture, even with the rise of like organic foods and getting back
Mhm.
to the fact that's even like even have to say organic foods, like food should just be like real food. Like
Right.
why do we have to say it's organic? Like food should be organic. That's what
Yeah.
food should be. It should be just food. And what we have now should be just labeled processed food,
Mhm.
but that's food. It's weird how that dialogue has changed and the language has changed, but our ancestors just knew, like, if you grew your crops, like, that's food. They're not
Yeah.
in a factory making, like, cosmic brownies and all the
Right.
fake
Yeah.
food.
Yeah, and, like, my ancestors actually I found this out after I got into herbalism, which I thought was really neat. So I'm a descendant of Taino Indians, which are Puerto Rican, Native Americans, and their whole culture is about herbs and, like, herbalism. So it was really interesting how, like, I, like, intuitively almost knew that, like, that was almost my path in life is to help and provide people information about herbs. Like, it was really fascinating. I don't know, I think it's interesting that, like, your descendants and, like, where you come from, like, creates a big aspect. And, like, when you think about it, like, people back then, they were farmers. Like, we didn't have these, like, processed food, like, huge industries. Like, everyone grew their own gardens or they traded for, like, bread or things like that or corn, and it's almost like I can see it coming back a little more. Like, there's a lot more farming, there's a lot more organic things, but I think we almost lost that kind of connection.
Yeah, there's still a long way to go with trying to get at least somewhat of that back.
For sure.
And I think we need it as a culture. I think people are suffering. I think we take a look around between diseases that are starting to occur more and more frequent in younger and younger people. Um, we have a clear issue,
Mhm.
and I think it's obvious that it has to be somewhat of the food. And if we don't say it's the food, I think it's kind of insane because like the only thing that has changed like drastically like that besides medicine is our food, and it's obviously to somewhat help with distributing. We have so many people. We're trying to make food more accessible, but in the pursuit of that, we've sacrificed the actual organic food itself
Yeah.
for the dollar to try to make more money with cheaper food. And I think we're going to be we're currently suffering. So it's going to take a lot of things to turn that around. And I think the things that you're doing are a step in the right direction to try to help correct a lot of these behaviors. And I
Thank
hope
you.
you continue pursuing this and keep going forward with this because I think this type of stuff is what we need most currently in our society. We're getting towards the end, so I want to start bringing us home with that. But I
Yeah, of
wanted to
course.
make sure I tied the bow with that. I do have the last question for you, so ask that. What advice would you give someone that wants to pursue their passion?
I would say to not hold back. I feel like a lot of time people almost never try because the failure or like the idea of failure is so scary. But realistically, like if you don't try, you'll never know. And it's something that I had to learn almost is like the fear of failure is not as scary as the feeling of success. And a lot of time people almost get wrapped in their own minds. Like I don't think I would ever do what I was doing now if I didn't push myself to be better and to strive for change and to just overcome that fear that people get.
100%. Fear is going to hold you back every single time. And sometimes if you have fear, you're probably looking in the right places.
Yeah.
It's where you have to persevere and go through it. And even if you fail, you're learning. And
Mhm.
that's going to help you on your journey. And I think that's fantastic advice. But Elena, I really appreciate you for coming on the podcast and
Thank
sharing what
you.
you do and getting into spaces that are a little bit more vulnerable and talking about your life personally. And I think it's a blessing to have someone like yourself come on the podcast and talk about that. And anyone that could sit across from me and do a podcast interview, I always appreciate. So thank you for doing this.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. If you want, you could plug your Instagram into this camera.
Oh yeah. So my Instagram is Virgo's Brew RI, and I also have a Facebook page called Virgo's Brew.
Perfect. So if you guys that want to like the podcast, rate the podcast, please do all that. Check it out at the Carroll Connection.simplecast.com. Also available Apple Podcast, Spotify, and all the major listening platforms. If you'd like to watch your podcast, go on YouTube, search the Carroll Connection or at Jared M. Carroll, and it should pop up for you. And if you want to be a guest or return as a guest, hit me up on Instagram at Jared M. Carroll at the Carroll Connection, and we'll set that up. So until next time, guys, peace.